It was the kind of night that swallows time whole, the kind where the clock on the wall seems to tick slower, just to remind you how much longer you have to endure. And outside the daycare windows, the rain had been falling in a steady, relentless sheet since sunset, washing the world in cold silver. Inside Little Steps Daycare, the hum of the old heater rattled through the vents, carrying the faint, sweet scent of baby powder and the lingering tang of bleach from the evening's cleanup. The rooms were dim now, the cheerful colors muted in the low light, the once bustling play area now silent, except for the occasional creak of the old building settling. In the far corner of the infant room, under a mural of painted clouds and faded smiling suns, a young black woman named Alana lay on the worn carpet with a folded blanket under her head, her arm wrapped around a baby girl named Amira, whose tiny curls were damp with tears. The baby's sobs had quieted to soft hiccups, but her little fist still clung desperately to the fabric of Alana's sweater, as if letting go meant losing the last bit of safety she had. Alana's body ached from the floor's hardness, and the back of her neck burned from where she'd been lying too long in the same position. But she didn't move. She'd been there since 6:45 p.m., after the last staff member had clocked out and locked the front door, after the calls to Amira's parents went unanswered yet again, after the director's frustrated voice over the phone told her to just put the child in the crib and leave. We're not running a boarding school. But Alana couldn't. She'd tried. She'd placed Amira in the crib twice, stepping back to let the baby settle, but each time the cries had erupted again, sharp and panicked, the kind of cries that came from somewhere deeper than hunger or tiredness. So she stayed. She sang softly at first, old gospel lullabies her grandmother had used when the world outside their walls was cruel, then hummed when her voice grew too hoarse, matching the rise and fall of her breath to the baby's trembling chest, until, slowly, the tiny body eased into something like sleep. The hours blurred together. 8 p.m. came and went, the rain still drumming against the windows. 9:15 p.m., she found herself whispering stories about princesses who lived in kingdoms of kindness, because if no one else would give Amira a fairy tale, she would. 11:40 p.m., she shifted to ease the ache in her side, careful not to wake the baby. At 1:12 a.m., a branch scraped against the window, startling her heart into a sprint. At 3:07 a.m., she caught herself dozing, jerking awake with a rush of guilt, as though letting herself sleep would be abandoning her post. And all through the night the thought gnawed at her. If she left, if she followed the rules, this child would spend the night alone, her cries echoing in the dark until her voice gave out. That was something Alana knew too well. She could still remember being 8 years old, sitting on the edge of a thin mattress in the corner of her aunt's apartment, waiting for a mother who didn't come the sound of her own breathing, the only company she had until the sun came up. That memory was a bruise that never faded, and she wasn't about to let Amira collect one of her own. By morning, the rain had thinned to a mist, the gray sky bleeding slowly into the pale blue of dawn. Alana's eyes felt like sandpaper, her lips dry, her voice nearly gone. She was half asleep, humming automatically, when the sound of tires on wet pavement reached her ears. She thought it was a parent arriving early, maybe Amira's finally showing up with hurried apologies. But the car that pulled into the parking lot wasn't T1 she recognized. It was sleek and black, its paint gleaming even under the cloudy light, its windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. The engine cut off, and for a moment, the world was still. Then the driver's door opened, and out stepped a tall man in a tailored charcoal overcoat, the kind of man who didn't look like he belonged in this part of town. His name was Jonathan Hale, though she didn't know it yet. A billionaire, CEO of Hale Technologies, philanthropist, widower. The kind of man who had built an empire from nothing but an idea and a laptop, then used the fortune it brought him to fund causes he thought mattered: education, housing, children's health. He had grown up in a one-bedroom apartment with a mother who worked 2 jobs and still came home with just enough energy to ask him about his day. A mother who died far too young because she'd spent her life taking care of everyone but herself. Jonathan had seen enough neglect in his own neighborhood as a boy to know that rules and policies often protected institutions more than people. That was why the comment he overheard at last week's charity gala had stuck in his mind. "She goes too far for those kids," a wealthy donor's wife had said, her lips curling like the idea disgusted her. Jonathan had wanted to know what too far looked like. Through the daycare's glass door, he saw it, and he froze. A young black woman lying on the floor, her body curved protectively around a sleeping baby, her eyes half shut in exhaustion but still watchful. The scene didn't look unprofessional. It looked sacred. He stepped inside quietly. The chime above the door rang softly. She didn't notice him at first, too focused on the tiny rise and fall of Amira's chest. But when the floor creaked under his step, she glanced up, startled. Her eyes sharpened in that instant assessment of strangers women learn early in life, danger or not. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice low but firm. "We're closed." Jonathan didn't move closer yet. "Why are you still here?" She hesitated, then looked down at the child. "Her parents didn't come." She stroked the baby's back absently. "I couldn't leave her here alone." "Do you get paid for this?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, and it's against policy to stay after hours." She looked him in the eye then, her voice steady. "But policies don't keep kids warm." Something in him tightened at that. He took in the frayed sweater cuffs, the faint tremor in her hands from fatigue, the quiet fierceness in her expression. "What's her name?" he asked. "Amira," she said softly. "It means princess. But she doesn't have much of a kingdom right now." The words landed like stones in his chest. He crouched to her level. "You remind me of someone I knew, someone who refused to let rules stop her from doing what was right. She paid for it." Alana tilted her head. "Sometimes doing the right thing costs more than people think." The baby stirred, and Alana instinctively pulled her closer. Jonathan watched for a long moment, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather notebook. He scribbled quickly, tore out the page, and handed it to her. "Call this number tomorrow. Tell them I sent you." "What is this?" she asked. "An opportunity," he said simply. He stood, moved to the door, and before stepping out into the mist, he turned back. "You stayed when no one else would. Remember that." The number belonged to the director of the Hale Foundation. When Alana called the next day, she was invited to an interview. The weeks that followed were grueling. Meetings in glass-walled boardrooms where her thrift store skirt and second-hand blazer stood out against the tailored power suits of people who spoke in acronyms and balance sheets. Some of them didn't bother hiding their skepticism. She caught the looks, the quiet comments. "She's just a daycare worker. And she's black." They asked if she'd be comfortable managing large budgets, if she had experience leading a team of professionals, as though managing 20 toddlers single-handedly didn't qualify. But she answered each question with calm precision, telling them about stretching snack supplies so every child had enough, about calling social services when a child came in with bruises, about learning to soothe tantrums not with punishment, but with patience. The resistance was strongest from one board member, a silver-haired man named Whitman, who said flatly in a meeting, "We need someone with credentials, not just compassion." Alana met his gaze and replied, "If credentials fixed the system, we wouldn't be here." Jonathan, sitting at the head of the table, smiled faintly at that. It took 6 weeks of evaluations, background checks, and tense votes, but in the end she was hired. Not just as an advisor, but as the director of a new initiative to build Hale and Hart child care centers in underserved areas. The first opened 8 months later, A bright building filled with murals, stocked bookshelves, and classrooms designed for safety and warmth. Teachers were paid fairly, parents could drop children off at night if their jobs demanded it, and every child was greeted by name each morning. At the ribbon cutting, reporters crowded around, cameras flashing. Alana spotted Amira in the front row, now healthy, smiling, and sitting with a foster family who adored her. As the ribbon fell away, Jonathan leaned down and said, "This all started because you slept on that floor." And that's when Alana saw them. Amira's birth parents, lingering at the edge of the crowd, hesitant, guilt in their eyes. They approached after the ceremony. The mother's voice trembled as she said, I'm sorry. We lost our way." Alana studied them, measured the sincerity in their faces. She didn't forgive instantly. Real wounds don't heal in one conversation. But she said, "If you want to be in her life, you'll have to earn it, step by step." And for the first time, she saw in their eyes something like resolve. In that moment, she understood that love wasn't just about staying when no one else would. It was also about building a place so people had a chance to come back, better than they left.